Hey, welcome. Today we're going to get into something we all do, but maybe don't think about too much, and that's crying. It seems so simple, but there's this whole invisible rule book that society has written about who gets to cry, when they can do it, and why. So let's get right into it. First things first, the big one. Why do we even cry? I mean, yeah, it happens when we're super sad, obviously, but it also happens when we're incredibly happy, right? Or when we feel this huge sense of relief, or even when we hear a piece of music that's just perfect. It's our body's way of reacting to a feeling that's just too big to hold in. But to really understand the story of our tears, we have to look at where they come from in the first place. And that brings us right to the biology of it all. Before we can talk about the social stuff, all the complicated rules, we gotta understand the mechanics. How does your body actually make a tear?
Well, turns out every single one of us comes with this amazing bit of biological hardware. It's called the lacrimal apparatus. You can just think of it as your body's built-in tear factory and plumbing system. It's the machinery behind every single tear you've ever cried.
So here's how it works. You've got this little gland, the lacrimal gland, tucked up above your eye, and it makes the tear fluid. That fluid washes over your eye to keep it clean. Now, most of the time, it just drains away through this tiny little hole in the corner of your eyelid and then travels down a duct right into your nose. And that is exactly why your nose runs when you cry. So crying is really just what happens when that whole system gets flooded with emotion and the tears have nowhere to go but, well, down your cheeks. It's just a biological overflow. Okay, and this is where things get really, really interesting. If we all have the same basic plumbing, right, the same hardware, then why is crying such a different experience for different people? The answer, it turns out, has nothing to do with our biology and everything to do with our society. To really get this, we have to be super clear about one thing, the difference between sex and gender. So, sex is biological. It's the physical stuff you're born with. But gender is social. It's the whole set of rules and expectations and attitudes that our culture decides goes along with being a man or a woman. And the most important part of that is gender is something we learn. And check this out. The data is pretty wild. As babies and little kids, boys and girls cry pretty much the same amount. There's no real difference. But then, somewhere around ages 11 to 13, right when puberty kicks in, a huge gap opens up. All of a sudden, the crying frequencies are totally different. That timing is a massive clue. It tells us that as we're growing up, it's not just our bodies that are changing. We're also becoming experts at picking up on all the unwritten social rules of our world. And believe me, there are a lot of rules about crying. The philosopher Simone de Beauvoir absolutely nailed it with this idea. She said you aren't just born a woman, you become one. You learn the part. And part of learning that role is understanding that expressing sadness with tears is, well, it's not just allowed, it's often expected. And what about boys? Well, they learn a totally different rule, and it's a lot more direct, isn't it? Think about phrases like, boys don't cry, or don't be a sissy. Those aren't just words, they're powerful instructions. They teach boys from day one that being a man means bottling up your feelings, keeping them under lock and key. Here's a great way to think about how this social conditioning works. Just imagine for a second that our society decided blue-eyed kids are strong and brown-eyed kids are delicate. And we just went with it. We'd tell the blue-eyed kids to tough it out, and we'd rush to comfort the brown-eyed kids. After a while, without even thinking about it, they just start acting that way. That right there is basically how we teach gender. So what does this actually look like in day-to-day life? Well, all these rules we've learned create this really harmful double standard, where the exact same action, crying, gets a completely different reaction based on who's doing it. For men, it's a total paradox. If he cries, he's often seen as weak or unstable. But if he locks down his emotions, he's seen as cold or robotic. It's a lose-lose. For women, it's more socially okay to cry, but that has its own trap. A woman's tears can be easily written off as her being too emotional, irrational, or even worse, that she's using them to manipulate someone. So either way, you can see how true, genuine emotional expression kind of gets lost in the shuffle. But there's this one really fascinating exception to the rule, sports. In that super masculine world, when a man cries after a huge win or a crushing loss, we see it differently. Suddenly, it's a sign of his passion, of how much he cares. It just goes to show you how made up and context-specific all these rules really are. So what's the big deal? You might be thinking, they're just tears, who cares? Well, it turns out the consequences of telling millions of people to shut down a perfectly natural human response, they're actually pretty serious. I mean, the science on this is pretty clear. When you suppress your emotions, they don't just disappear. All that bottled up feeling can lead to serious stuff: anxiety, problems in your relationships, even actual physical symptoms. It basically disconnects you from yourself and becomes this heavy burden that's just exhausting to carry around all the time. So here's the bottom line. Crying is a universal human response. It's biology. It's just part of our design. The rules, the judgment, the shame that we layer on top of it, that's all invented. And the cool thing about inventions is they can be uninvented. They can be changed. So I'll leave you with this to think about. If crying is something we all do, something fundamentally human, who actually benefits from a system where the rules for it aren't the same for everyone?